The morning of October 3rd, 1780, dawned crisp and clear, a typical Jamaican day. In the southwestern part, there was a slight wind and a few intermittent showers, but all in all, things were calm and looking to remain so. By midday, all that changed. Here is how the governor, Colonel John Dalling, described this change of events in his official report to London. The sky on a sudden became very much overcast, and an uncommon elevation of the sea immediately followed. Whilst the unhappy settlers at Savannah Lamar were observing this extraordinary phenomenon, the sea broke suddenly in upon the town, and on its retreat swept away everything with it, so as not to leave the smallest vestige of man, beast, or house behind. That was only the beginning of the destruction. The catastrophe Darling described above was followed by what many call the most devastating hurricane to have hit the island up to that point in its history. By midday, buildings on the southwest coast of the island began to sway back and forth as if they were being balanced on a tightrope. Fires broke out and spread. By 4 p.m., the full force of the hurricane had arrived, and the town of Savannah Lamar lay directly in its path. It is said a mighty wave rose out of the boiling sea and swept over the coast for a mile. Along with the debris of the homes and businesses, 2 ships and a schooner were carried along and left stranded among mango trees. By nightfall, not one building was left standing in town or for 30 or 40 miles on either side. In addition, all buildings in the parishes of Westmoreland, Hanover, and some parts of St. James and St. Elizabeth were demolished. Property owners were unable to identify their estate boundaries. Slave provision grounds were demolished. Trees and plants were blown away and flattened. Mountains and valleys denuded. The majority of its population drowned or crushed to death. Rivers were running through new channels. Large lakes were seen in districts which a day before had been covered in cane fields. Huge rocks were hurled down from the highest mountains. Deep ravines formed across the roads, which were everywhere impassable. In the days that followed, husbands looked for wives, mothers for sons, sisters for brothers, to no avail. It is impossible to tell just how many lives were lost. The dead lay unburied and disease began to spread. The destruction of the food crops resulted in a famine, and because the American War of Independence was being waged, none could be imported from the nearby colonies. Thousands of slaves starved to death. In Kingston, citizens raised £10,000 to help their countrymen in the West. The British government sent an additional £40,000. The damage, however, was estimated at £700,000. Folklore pins the devastation of this western town as the work of runaway slave known as Plato the Wizard, from beyond the grave. Just before his 1780 execution, the renowned Obeahman pronounced a curse on Jamaica, predicting that his death would be avenged by a terrible storm set to befall the island before the end of that same year. It is said that Plato and his band of other runaways kept the parish of Westmoreland in a state of perpetual alarm from his stronghold in the Moorland Mountains. Plato warned that whoever dared lay a finger on him would suffer spiritual torments. It is not surprising that no slave would set traps for Plato, even though the reward for his capture was great. You hear the foul them people? Them not easy, you know. Plato, who like Taki was an example of the type of spirit slavery could not hold, did have one weakness, in rum, and it was to prove his downfall. During a time when his usual supplies were curtailed as a result of massive hunt for his arrest, he arranged with a watchman he knew well to go out and get him some rum. The watchman decided to use the rum as bait. It was easier than he expected. Soon after he handed Plato the rum, he fell into a drunken stupor and right into the watchman's trap. Plato was captured, tried, and immediately sentenced to death. In response, he coolly cursed any and everything in sight as a dreadful power is said to have descended on him. Plato terrified the jailer who tied him to the stake by announcing that he had cast an obeah spell on him and he did not have long to live. Soon after Plato's death, the jailer fell ill and died. Before the year was over, Plato's other curse came true. The island was hit by what was described as the most terrible hurricane that ever spread death and destruction even in West Indian seas. The region where Plato the wizard had roamed free and died in Betrayal was hardest hit. Jamaica was not the only island to suffer the effects of the hurricane of 1780. Martinique lost 7,000 people and Barbados 4,300. Jamaica was ravaged again by another massive hurricane in the following year. Over 100 ships were driven ashore and all newly planted provision grounds destroyed. More hurricanes followed in that decade alone. 1784, 1785, 1786. Could it be that Plato's spirit continued to hover over the island? Hurricanes also swept Jamaica in the 19th and 20th centuries in the following years. 1804, 1815, 1818, 1830, 1832, 1844, 1874, 1879, 1880, 1903, 1916, 1917, 1944, 1951, which that was Charlie, which damaged Kingston, Port Royal and Morant Bay. 1963, it was Flora, and 1988, Gilbert. So guys, that was just a slight history about hurricanes in Jamaica, and if you enjoyed this video about the wickedest hurricane that ever swept Jamaica, please give this video a thumbs up, and remember to subscribe to the channel by clicking the red subscribe button and turn on notifications to receive all of my updates. Thank you again for joining, guys. I am Alex. Bless.